Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. The Canadian Grand Prix is this weekend after 2 consecutive races of Mercedes getting closer and closer to the front with upgrades, and with more upgrades to come this weekend, and with the new front wing they believe is going to work better at this particular circuit. Mercedes believe this may be their chance to close the gap even further, if not all the way, to McLaren, Ferrari, and who even knows about Red Bull. Very much on Twitter, your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. So much on the driver market today, but before we get into that, this is the new set of regulations for 2026. Confirmed today by the FIA, they will arrive tomorrow. So we've now speculated for some time, when are we going to see these new regulations? Because the regulations are going to be worked on from January the 1st, we believe, 2025. 1 year, of course, basically ahead of when the regulations come into effect. We've known the engine rules now for a long time. The aero rules, however, were causing a lot of controversy. They were delayed a couple of times because they were a bit of a shambles, apparently. I don't know if this is going to be good. We are probably going to see tomorrow marginally smaller cars, marginally lighter cars, and various other things that the engineers will be absolutely digging their teeth into. I'm guessing if this is coming out publicly tomorrow, is it possible the teams already have some of this stuff? I don't know. But I speculated now for some time that Adrian Newey may well wait to see what these look like, whether he thinks they're any good, before committing to a contract with a certain potentially red-coloured team, such as Ferrari at Maranello. So tomorrow, we're going to see a lot. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of analysis on whether these are going to be good or bad, and what that means for the respective teams in the future, because there's been lots of concerns raised, especially by Red Bull, which is maybe not a massive surprise given the fact that Red Bull have dominated this cycle of regulations. They would probably like to see things stay as close to they presently are as possible, but that is relatively unlikely to happen. They will still be ground effect to some degree, but they will be dramatically different cars. We've talked about the DRS, whether there's going to be like reverse DRS using the front wing instead, active aero on the front and rear wings. Could be very interesting. With all the drama around Esteban Ocon over the last few days, it was confirmed today that Jack Doohan, the reserve driver Formula 2 guy for Alpine, will be driving the A524 in FP1, replacing, of course, Esteban Ocon. So, can you believe it, right? Ocon is not just gone at the end of the season, but the very next weekends, they've decided, you know what, we're going to drop you for an FP1 session and put Doohan in the car instead. They want to analyse Doohan quite rapidly to see whether he is actually a good candidate to replace Ocon next year at Alpine. Certainly given the fact that Behrman is very likely getting the Haas seat, the fact that Antonelli looks almost nailed on now to get the Mercedes seat. I imagine that makes Alpine think, you know what, why not give Doohan the Alpine seat alongside Gasly, especially because it's not like Alpine are fighting for championships and, you know, they have something to lose by putting a rookie in their car. Apparently he's done tests over the last few days, it's been looking good, or at least the simulator work has been looking good. This is the other probably main piece of drama though, that apparently Bruno Ferman, of course the team principal now at Alpine, wanted to suspend Ocon. He wanted Ocon gone, he was like fed up with this guy, and in some sense don't blame him. I also think this kind of confirms to some extent to me that this was like almost a decision being made before the crash in Monaco, as in they were, as far as I'm concerned, looking for reasons to get rid of Ocon. Monaco then happens and they're like, Ferman's like, all right, fantastic, I've had enough of this guy, I'm getting rid of him. Now, they are getting rid of him at the end of the season, but apparently they wanted to get rid of him like now and suspend him for Montreal and put Doohan in the car instead. They're not doing that. He's still going to race in Montreal and seemingly beyond, but there were rumours today that they were going to do this. They were going to drop him before Canada, and who knows for how long. But the lawyers said, you know what, guys, it might not be the best idea because there's, you know, French law, whatever, deprivation of his right to work, according to French press, so maybe they couldn't just fire him. They kind of wanted to avoid like a Piastri-related fiasco saga that happened in 2022 with all the drama of the contracts behind the scenes and like the relationship between the drivers, and therefore get into some sort of trouble. So I guess they decided, all right, like, let me compromise, guys. We'll fire him for the end of the season, but we'll keep him, you know, for now, I guess, and not drop him yet. So we'll see if they can find a way around that, because if they can, I'm guessing they're just going to drop him. Certainly Ferman seems to want to, and honestly, with Ocon, I didn't even mention this the other day, but the shackles are now off Ocon in some sense. Yes, he needs a drive for next season, and this is what's interesting, right, is that Ocon and Gasly, Ocon and Alonso, Ocon and Perez, whoever, they've not got along on track whenever they've teamed together. But now Ocon is out of a drive. He's been at Enstone with the Renault Alpine team now for 5 years. That's no longer the case. He needs to drive next season. The belief is in the paddock that maybe Haas is possible, but is still rather unlikely, and there's no other drive that's really going to be out there for Ocon. So he's got to prove his worth, and fast. So the pressure is on in terms of proving his worth, but at the same time, the shackles are off in terms of he's no longer going to be with Alpine. He no longer has to play nice. And if that was Ocon's playing nice with Gasly so far this season, you can only imagine what Ocon's going to be like from now to the end of the season, right? So, well, we'll see, I guess, whether he calms it down or whether he actually goes even further, right? Because there is an argument to say that Ocon actually could be even more aggressive with Gasly, even more aggressive in all these scenarios, because he's got to prove that he's straight up better than Gasly, so somebody else is going to give him a chance, and he doesn't have long to do that. Now, Alpine obviously are going to get rid of him. Doohan is apparently potentially a front runner here with excellent feedback from the simulator. There's also discussion that Zhou could be an outside contender currently at Sauber. That is maybe not going to last too much longer. They're going to become Audi. They want Sainz. They may get Sainz. Of course, they have Hülkenberg as well. Therefore, Bottas need to drive. The rumour is that Bottas is quite possibly going to go to Williams if Sainz goes the other way. So it's plausible that Audi Sauber next season, when they're still kind of Sauber, but they'll be Audi the year after, is going to be either Sainz Hülkenberg and therefore Bottas Albon, or it could be Bottas Hülkenberg if Bottas were to stay, and then Albon Sainz, depending what Sainz decides, effectively. If he goes to the Williams offer, which apparently is pretty lucrative and actually makes, I think, a fair bit of sense looking at the Mercedes engine project in 2026 we're going to discuss here in a second, rather than the absolute backmarker Sauber team that may get good in 26 with Audi, but it may still take some time. That's a decision Sainz has to make. That is probably the next decision that will be made, and then once it is, Bottas probably slots in as well. This does put Liam Lawson in an interesting spot though, and I really wanted to discuss what the case is right now with Red Bull and their decision to keep Sergio Perez. The fact that for several years, they've been a ruthless outfit. It's been win above all. It's been use the junior team to develop junior drivers. The team, since Mateschitz' passing, it must be said, has felt, in some sense, very different, and it feels like the team is being run and managed in a different way, and that is having repercussions everywhere you look, such as for Liam Lawson, who probably has no option now at Red Bull. There's a good argument to say that when De Vries was dropped last season, it should have been Lawson in the car rather than Ricciardo, but it's not, it never was, and now Lawson's potentially out of a drive, so therefore he's got to look at a team like Alpine, or basically wherever may potentially take him. But on the Red Bull side, just a few words here from them on the future of Sergio Perez, right? Because it's a very un-Red Bull-like thing to do. You know, we saw how they treated Gasly, we saw how they treated Albon, obviously even drivers before that as well. And, you know, now is a very different story. It's the same, obviously, for many of their junior drivers as well. What happened to Nick De Vries, for example, and Yuki Tsunoda has now been at that team for 4 years and sees no potential hope of advancement. Doesn't he look like Christian Horner in this, by the way? Like, am I tripping, or is this, like, kind of Horner-esque, this angle here of Sergio Perez after signing his extension? Horner himself says continuity and stability are important for the team, as seemingly is the amount of money Checo brings in. Because I'm not going to lie, you look at Perez's sponsorship and exactly what he brings to the team, like this is his right lineup of sponsors. Like, you know, this guy is cooking. And I don't think I'd quite go as far to say that Perez is a pay driver, but I think I would say that Red Bull as a team, I mean, they've effectively admitted with this announcement they don't really care about the constructors, because if they did, then surely you don't re-sign Perez, right? So it seems to me that there is a feeling at Red Bull that they've changed somewhat over the last couple of years, probably since the passing of Mateschitz, I would say, with the power struggle that's happened, Horner taking control, making various decisions that, look, obviously he wants to win, but there's potentially a feeling to me that it's more about now, you know, the money and the revenues and the sponsorship stuff, and obviously that includes keeping Ricciardo at RB. Like, I don't think under Mateschitz this would be flying. I don't think there's any way, if Dietrich Mateschitz was still alive, that Ricciardo would still be at RB, that even he might have not been brought back in the first place, and that Perez would still be at Red Bull. So, you know, whatever that says about the direction that Red Bull are taking right now, and that is certainly a debate that I'm sure you guys will have in the comment section below, what does it mean for the competitiveness of the team? Like, does it say anything about the feeling at Red Bull, what they're focused on, and what that potentially means for the future? Because, look, Horner's saying he had a strong start to 24, second place in Bahrain, Jeddah, Japan, a podium in China. Last few races have been tough, but we are confident in Checo, and we look forward to seeing his return to proven form and performance that we so often see. But, you know, do we see it that often? I don't know if we really do. So, into your thoughts in the comments below, but just looking at the fact that Perez is due to become, and with Max Verstappen, the longest-serving F1 teammate ever. So Valtteri Bottas and Lewis Hamilton, 100 races together, of course. Bottas famously made Q3 in every single one of those appearances. Before that, it was Hakkinen and Coulthard. Obviously, Schumacher, Barrichello is the longest-serving duo until Perez and Max, if they run as they are contracted to until the end of 2026, will have raced 138 races together, which feels remarkable to think given Perez's current performance and the fact that I'm not sure there should be an awful lot of optimism, certainly given the history, that he's going to magically turn this whole thing around. So my takeaway really is that Red Bull are now a less ruthless organisation on and off the track, and I think that may have implications for how they actually perform over the next couple of seasons. These are the lineups that we know, so Verstappen, Perez, Leclerc, Hamilton, Norris, Piastri, Alonso, Stroll, obviously, I mean it is going to be Stroll. The rest is very much unknown. Probably Gasly stays at Alpine, probably Antonelli into the Mercedes. There's still talk, why don't they sign Sainz? The issue is they want to put Antonelli in the car. They could send him to Williams, but the issue is if you sign Sainz, then what are you going to do? Get rid of him after a year? Sainz would want a 1+1 at least, if not a 2+1 or something like that. So it probably makes more sense to Mercedes, especially because they've got Antonelli on the contract. Just put him in the car next season, and then Sainz can go to Williams or something like that. The Alpine pairing, the RB pairing is likely to remain Tsunoda and Ricciardo, but Tsunoda may just leave and go elsewhere, and then Lawson might get the chance. There's also Iwasa, there's also Hadjar, there's also Marty, right, who are in the junior scheme of Red Bull. That's, you know, historically, one of those at least would be in the car by now, right? That was the whole purpose, right? Like, the junior team was there to regress. Now the junior team seems like just a cash cow, effectively. So, yeah, how times have changed in many respects. That is the setup anyway, but we've got to talk about what the case is going into Montreal, because Max Verstappen has said he ain't that confident for this weekend's race. Following a difficult weekend in Monaco, I've been back at the factory in the sim preparing for the Canadian Grand Prix. Very unique track, has some old school curbs, of course. We know the curbs aren't especially liked by the RB20, as we've seen over the last couple of rounds. Plenty of chances to overtake. Very important to have a good setup of the car to find a balance between the straight line speeds as well as good stability under the braking, says Max. Obviously, he also said the other day that he ain't that confident they're going to be super strong here. The question is, though, who is going to be strong here? It's not necessarily going to be down to riding the curbs or something like that, because it's more than likely going to rain. It's probably going to be a very wet weekend. It's going to rain on Friday. It's probably going to rain very heavily on Saturday, and it's likely to rain Sunday as well. So it may not. Well, okay, it will rain. The question is, when does it rain? Does it rain during the on-track action or whatever, during the race, for example? So Giuliano De Kesse here says in Formula Uno, it's not going to be so much this weekend about aero efficiency, about who rides better on the curbs. It's more going to be down to how can you get the inters fired up, what are your load settings like, and what ride heights can you actually run at effectively, because the wet conditions are going to mess things up. I think it's going to be interesting to see how McLaren fare. I think Ferrari will be relatively strong. I think Red Bull will, of course, be relatively strong. McLaren have some interesting points just because they think their low-speed performance is quite substantially improved, more than they thought with recent upgrades. We saw that, it seems, in Imola. We saw that most certainly, it seems, in Monaco. So if they can replicate that at Canada, they can be, I think, a real threat. Certainly because getting the tyres into the right window could be a problem for Ferrari, given that their tyre deck is good, but getting that 1 lap pace has been problematic, getting heat into the tyres, which can be a problem if you're, trying to get your inters up to temperature and you're struggling with that. But over the last couple of rounds, Mercedes themselves have been slowly gathering some momentum. I mean, they're talking about the fact that they're bringing upgrades like every single round. Not only have they got new parts in Canada, in Spain, in Austria, in Silverstone, apparently they're bringing upgrades every single race until Spa. Now, that was a rumor yesterday that basically every race for the next 6-7 races, they're going to have some sort of new package. Ferrari are kind of more biding their time. When they bring upgrades, they'll bring substantial upgrades, but Mercedes are just bolting on new parts basically every single weekend, and they feel like they're gaining some more understanding. Their car was certainly better in Monaco, certainly in qualifying, and their car was very solid in Imola. It just lacked the downforce and the top-end performance that the other teams were capable of. But in Monaco, they unveiled the new front wing. That was on George Russell's car, and Mercedes really liked it. Russell liked it. They thought that it was working well compared to Hamilton's version, and Mercedes say they expect even more from that upgrade in Canada, plus other packages we believe they are bringing. This is just the comparison, by the way, between the Hamilton rear wing and what they were running at the start of the season and this newer version. So they tried this idea, we talked about it a lot at the start of the season, to this top flap, the fourth element of the rear wing, to limit it and connect it by a small piece of wire, also known as like a legality wire, just to ensure that it complies with the regulations, but it allows more airflow here into the front of the floor. There was talk about, the Y250 vortices and all this stuff they were trying to potentially generate. Seems like Mercedes felt like maybe it did what it was intended to do, but this was potentially sacrificing too much performance from the actual front wing. So they've decided, okay, we're going to go for a far more traditional approach where we just have a normal top wing element. It's still interesting and unique in some ways, rather similar to last year's W14 wing actually, and they've got a slightly smaller mouth, if we want to call it that, in the front of the nose here than they had before. So Merc are confident they're going to be competitive in Canada. It's also one of Hamilton's best tracks. Of course, he scored a podium last year with the W14 behind Fernando Alonso and, of course, Max Verstappen. Historically, a great track, of course, for Hamilton. And yeah, we'll see if Mercedes can really deliver, because in wet conditions, I think it's kind of all to play for. It's not so clear who's going to be stronger, who's going to be weaker, because it's maybe not always about pure performance. It's about who can extract the most from their car. Now, if you bring upgrades, the understanding is always a bit of a question, and that is going to be big on weekends like this. Russell was also talking about the 2026 power unit, talking about how confident the team is for the upcoming era, and this is one of the other reasons I think why Carlos Sainz is going to be tempted by the Williams offer, just because they are likely to have a very competitive power unit come 2026 that Audi are not guaranteed to by any means. But regardless, it ain't exactly a choice of luxuries, is it, for Carlos Sainz as it stands, and he's not going to go to Haas. Haas are even saying, though, they think points are possible in Canada. So that's pretty exciting stuff as well. Haas are, they're cooking something, and if Ferrari are making progress, Haas are going to make progress as well. Just one final thing that was causing some controversy today. The AWS Formula One promotion, you know how it goes, like they do some activations. For the Canadian Grand Prix, the trophy is going to be designed by AI. Now, this always causes controversy, and I certainly understand it, right? Because, someone typically designs these trophies. Now, somebody still has to make it. The AI can't make it, but the AI can design it. So, a great designer who could have designed a trophy with some cultural heritage or whatever has been effectively replaced by a computer. So it never quite sits well. I'm not exactly sure what it's meant to look like. This has been an image that's been going around, but I'm pretty sure this is just a stock image straight off Google Images. So I may be wrong about that. This is an AI-generated trophy and picture, and this is actually kind of fire if it is this, but I'm pretty sure it's not, because yeah, I just Googled it and I just found this image on some website for an AI trophy. So I'm pretty sure this isn't it. It does kind of have some maple syrup, maple leaf vibes, I guess. So yeah, it's pretty cool maybe. I don't know. There's been some drama about it. Thought I'd mention it. But as I said, Canadian Grand Prix, weather forecast this weekend. It is looking very interesting for the upcoming race. So very much enjoyed your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care of yourselves. And I'll see you next time.